Hey, welcome back to Driver 88. You may have noticed that the market is getting soft and potentially getting softer at the moment. So I wanted to have a look at some starter supercars, some ones that are 10 years old but still offer incredible performance and value. We're here at Lorbek Luxury Cars again, so thank you to them for hosting us. We're going to be looking at a 650s Spider as well as an R8 Spider and maybe a V12 Vantage. Things that still look incredible but have had large depreciation thrust upon them. I'm going to do a review, a drive of all those, so please enjoy. So the first car that we're reviewing today for our starter supercar, good value, this thing, the Mark 1 facelift R8 Spider. One of three cars we're looking at today as a potential purchase for your very first supercar on a budget, so to speak. So what do you think about the looks of the Mark 1 facelift? I think it's aged quite well considering a 10-year-old car. Some people love this look, the sort of rounded shape of the original R8. I still think I prefer the 650s side profile and front, especially with the roof down on both cars with the side profile. It's really much of a muchness depending on which you prefer. But looks wise, I would still give to the 650s. Okay, so the 650s, I personally think right now, a 650s Spider is one of the best value supercars you can buy on the market. And why is that? For a few different reasons. One is that it doesn't really look that aged from the front and side, still looks absolutely incredible. The other reason is that it is so much cheaper than a 458 Spider if you can even find a good low kilometer one. And the other reason why is that this absolutely smokes an R8 Spider in terms of straight line performance, track performance, etc. Also, you can take this thing on broken roads with its brilliant suspension, you can take it to the track, and it'll still do, in perfect conditions, a 10.5 quarter mile for a car which is now pushing over 10 years old. Really, truly incredible from a value perspective. Pretty sure this one has a sports exhaust as well, which was a $10,000 option. You also had front lift on this car, which was another $10,000 option. So the performance for the cars couldn't be any more different. Of course, we've got an NA 5.2 litre V10, 0 to 100 turns up in around 3.8 seconds. You might just scrape into the 11s with quarter mile with this car. Due to the huge amount of extra weight, it's nowhere near as fast as the 650s, but it also is a lot cheaper. 525 horsepower, a little over 500 Newton meters of torque. The big difference, I think, in performance and reason why you might want to get a facelift of the Mark 1 R8 is because you get the dual clutch 7-speed instead of the original R-tronic 6-speed. So that certainly does help the quicker shifts and faster 0 to 100 time with the Spider. So some numbers on the R8. So this thing back in 2013. Over 10 years ago, the retail price before taxes was $400,000. So with this one asking $200,000, the depreciation in that time, $200,000, 50%, easy to work out. Looking at insurance was a bit of an interesting one. I got quoted for a 36-year-old male with no history, $3,800 for the year for insurance for the R8. Interestingly enough, the 650s, I could not find any insurance. So years ago, I've insured multiple McLarens, but for some reason, lots of people must be crashing or getting their McLarens stolen, and I could not find a 650s for insurance. You'd probably have to go through a specialist company for that one. Now, this particular car, brand new, was just under 600,000 Australian dollars. Today, it's 340 grand before taxes. Now, that's something like 34 to 35% depreciation over that time period. It is likely going to cost more to service than the R8 Spider. However, you've got so much more performance, and that's what you're paying for on top of that car. The rear of the car, it's not the best looking angle. It hasn't aged as well. I don't think it looked good when it came out, but hey, not every single angle of a supercar can look perfect. I can't wait to give this thing a bit of a drive. I've never driven a 650s Spider before. I've driven and owned a number of McLarens, so I'm really looking forward to drive this thing. But let's have a look at the interior first. Now, the 650s interior, it's a little bit cozier than its 570s cousin, but still feels very much like a supercar. A lot more than the R8 Spider, in my opinion. All this sort of layout of buttons has all changed over time pretty quickly. We've got a carbon interior, carbon back seats, all these expensive options that the original buyer paid for, and now we get it for much cheaper. Carbon steering wheel. Okay, getting into the R8 Spider. Not too difficult considering we're a convertible supercar. I really do. As much as this is not a manual, it still is incredibly cool, this aluminium shifter for the dual clutch. We've got a kind of mixture of new and old school. These dials do look fantastic with the R8 and the V10. It's something that some people are really feeling nostalgic about recently. Speaking of nostalgic, we have a manual handbrake, small screens here. Really, it's all about the V10 behind you and the noise that's coming behind you though. This car just has 13,500 kilometers on it. Needs a little bit of a cleanup. So with this being the facelift, we've got a carbon interior. We've also got, I believe, a updated Bang & Olufsen sound system from memory, but really, really quite nice. So we'll take this guy for a short drive. Thankfully, the sun is out in Melbourne for once. This car, I've never driven a Mark 1 R8 before. I've driven a Mark 2 Spider before, so it's going to be interesting. It also feels a little bit rawer than the Mark 2, even though it's probably not as refined. But that might be a good thing, especially when you're paying almost pretty much M4 money for the cost of a drop-top supercar. So, as a daily between the two, or just living with these cars around town, the R8 is kind of the king of dailyable supercars, and the Spider is no different. It's relatively easy to get in and out of, it's easy to drive. The steering is quite heavy. I mean, of course, this is an all-wheel drive car, and it is an Audi, and one thing that I think I don't particularly like about the car is the lack of steering feel up front, especially compared to the McLaren. But this is what it's all about. For 200 grand, I think you're getting your money's worth here. This has got low kilometers as well. They're not enormous money to service, just lovely to drive. The suspension is relatively hard, but it's really nothing that I think would bother an older person or a conservative person either. Let's hear some sport mode. There's the burbles. Just a lovely smooth V10 sound. I hope you can hear me. I kind of see this car more as a super GT car rather than a supercar almost. I mean, it's not slow, but it's not incredibly fast. I think for you to get in trouble with this car, you'd have to be driving incredibly stupidly to crash this thing. It's no Mustang, it's no twitchy Ferrari. This car is looking after you from a handling standpoint. You know, one thing that I've missed, which I didn't realize I missed, is the dials. They're just so nice to look at. It's like when we drove the Rapide the other week, one of the highlights of the interior was looking at the dials and not a digital screen. This badge, the Audi R8, has just finished its very, very final model. So after more than a decade of being built, in the first quarter of 2024, the Audi R8 is finished forever. So this car is pretty much on its way to being a modern classic very quickly. Can I tell you, it doesn't feel that much slower than the Mark II R8. There's certainly like a little bit of body roll, and the chassis doesn't feel as tight as the 650s. But this car is 30% cheaper than a 650s, and it's God knows how much cheaper than a 458 Spider. Yeah, like taking the corners a little bit faster, there's not much steering feel, but listen to that. So much character. You just feel like you're out in the elements. I mean, I drive gearboxes today that are from cars of 2024, and they don't feel this good. So it's a testament to Audi. Yes, it's not some like crazy monster, but this is so likable. What a perfect day to drive it as well. I could just drive this for hours. All right, let's have a look at the 650s. And I forgot, yes, you would maybe want to get this car in a manual if you could. The values of those cars have held up really well over the last few years, but you've still got this aluminium shifter that you can kind of push back and forward, and it's really satisfying. Really satisfying to move back and forward. So sitting in the 650s Spider, one thing I can say is the ergonomics in here aren't as good as the 720 and 570s, but you're going to pretty quickly get used to them. Yes, the front lift is annoying, but every single time you ever consider a McLaren, try and buy a Spider, because you hear everything and you experience everything so much better than the coupe. The V8s are really muffled in the coupe form of McLarens, whereas you get to experience the crack of the exhaust in these cars way more in a Spider form. Plus, you're missing out on barely any performance compared to the coupe format. You've got that huge amount of turbo whoosh from the outside, which adds to the experience. Lovely day for it. I do love the performance though. Accelerator pedal is a fair bit longer and slower to react than the 720s, but there's still an enormous amount of power, 641 horsepower, almost 700 newton meters. The 7-speed dual clutch is as fast as any other brand. A PDK might be a little bit more satisfying to play with, but they're still brilliant. It doesn't have the V10 sound of the R8, but it has all the torque. And this is what you want these cars for. Great weather, used in all sorts of different conditions. Of course, the 650 handles bumps incredibly well for a supercar. I've got everything in sport at the moment, but you can back things off into your normal modes and just cruise around town quite easily. Easily be daleable as long as you don't have any hip problems, I guess. But it's not a Lotus, so you won't have too many issues. Now in the corners compared to the R8, the front end, there's just no comparison. This is on its toes. It changes direction so quickly. You've got a good amount of steering feel. The chassis just feels so much tighter, even in bricks have just come off the back of someone's Land Cruiser. It feels so much tighter even when you're not driving that fast like now. It's just a joy to change direction in. And for me, that's what supercars are all about, is the responsiveness at the front end of the car. So let's just talk about the elephant in the room for a moment. People with used McLarens are probably going to be a little bit concerned with fit and finish, as well as servicing and maintenance, reliability, etc. This car, given its age, it's been quite well looked after and serviced by McLaren Melbourne and McLaren Sydney. There's even now good guys like Goodwood Garage here in Melbourne, who are former McLaren mechanics who can look after your used McLaren. I'm not going to say that they're going to be as reliable as an R8 or maybe even a 458 Spider, but I think if you get one that's been looked after properly and you can thoroughly go over it, then you really should be fine. Now let's put it into track mode. She can take a little bit of time to get in the boost, but I think that's pretty much fixed by being in track mode. Now, we'll put it into track mode. This car feels a little bit laggy in your normal modes, but once you put it in track mode, everything lets loose. You can hear just the engine wants to go. There's nothing in this segment for this money that will do all the things that this car does, quite simply. I realize how much I miss the ones that I used to own, and we recently drove and reviewed the 750s, and it was incredible. Just an incredibly well-rounded supercar that if you don't have $800,000 or $700,000 for, you can get 80% of what that car is for 300 something with a 650s Spider. I think that's a pretty good deal. What a car. So I think this is the best all-round, pound for pound supercar you can buy that's 10 years old today. Let me know any other ideas for 10-year-old supercars you think are better value for money, a better experience. I think there's a clear reason why Harry's Garage recently bought one. Really, really love it. Let us know what else you'd like to see next. This is Driver 88 and we'll see you next time.